Adina is the friendly astrologer that has joined the experiments on Lumia Island. Suns, moons, stars, and enemy test subject MMRs, there is no end to the number of things this girl can drop. However, she is a tad bit complicated, and I hope to clear up some of the mystery that surrounds this character. While space might be an unknown frontier, Adina does not have to be. When you play Adina, you have to play a puzzle game while juggling your normal Eternal Return duties. Some people compare it to playing Tetris or Bejeweled, but I promise you it's way easier. While there is a pretty steep learning curve, it just takes a few games of practicing it with the correct mindset. At least, that's what I want to believe. Adina has a ton of options in her gameplay. Her kit gives her great poke damage, great burst damage, great healing, and great crowd control. The only thing she is missing is mobility, which kinda sucks in a game that's full of wall hops, long dashes, and instant blinks. However, if you're fine being a mage juggernaut that spits spells out like there's no tomorrow, then you will really enjoy Adina. The main reason why Adina can feel overwhelming to play is due to the fact that she functionally has 14 different spells. While all 14 of these spells have different effects, their final output can often be very similar. Before we get into that though, let's talk about the spells themselves. Adina's passive, Stargazing, is where all the magic starts. She has 3 different icons that signify 3 different celestial signs. Sun, the icon represented by the blue sun, is the celestial sign that represents combustion. Abilities casted under the sun sign will inflict a small amount of true damage over time, which is called combust. Moon, the icon represented by the purple moon, is a celestial sign that represents crowd control. Abilities casted under the moon sign will inflict some sort of crowd control. Star, the icon represented by the pink star, is a celestial sign that represents speed and support. Abilities casted under the star sign will have much faster cast times, along with helpful buffs that are connected to each ability. You can cast up to 5 spells per sign cycle. When all 5 available spells are consumed, Adina will gain a brief burst of speed while refreshing her signs, and her next auto will slow her opponent. Leveling Adina's passive will also increase the amount of movement speed you gain while your celestial signs are recharging. Due to its importance in Adina's kit, we will be talking about her ultimate before we talk about her 3 basic abilities. Adina's ultimate ability, Celestial Prophecy, allows Adina to swap her leftmost active sign with the sign stored in her crystal ball. It may take a while to get used to, but the leftmost sign is the stored one, with the active signs being grouped to the right of them. When Adina connects 2 active signs, she will receive an empowered version of an ability depending on the signs that were connected, and both will be consumed. Adina will be able to use 1 conjunct per sign cycle. This empowered conjunct directly replaces the ability it empowers. This means you cannot use a normal version of the ability if the conjunct is active. Leveling Adina's ultimate enhances the unique bonus benefits from each conjunct. The Sun conjunct will gain more bonus damage on its initial hit. The Moon conjunct will gain a more powerful slow. The Star conjunct will gain increased healing from the nebula. For Adina's Q, Luminary, she chooses an orb that travels in a straight line. The Sun Q has no other benefits than applying the combustion burn. The Moon Q will expire upon hitting the first target, knocking them back and applying a brief stun afterwards. The Star Q will travel much faster while leaving a trail of stardust behind, which will increase your and your allies' movement speed by a significant amount. Connecting the star signs will empower Adina's Q. This conjunct of Q is much larger, deals significantly more damage, travels slower, and will deal additional continuous damage for enemies that remain in its hitbox. The burn passive will still be applied when the enemy leaves the hitbox. For Adina's W, Astral Trine, she will draw a triangle on the ground which explodes after a brief moment. Enemies hit will be slowed. The Sun W will simply apply the burn when it hits. The Moon W will stun enemies hit, with the slow being applied after the stun has expired. The Star W will be drawn more quickly. If Adina or allies are inside the triangle while it is being drawn, or when it expires, they will gain a CC immunity buff. Connecting the moon signs will empower Adina's W. This conjunct of W recasts a second astral trine on top of the original triangle, dealing additional damage and applying a more powerful slow. For Adina's E, Veda Horizon, she can mark enemies, allies, or herself to call down a meteor on their location. The meteor will deal damage on all enemies caught in this landing explosion. The Sun E will apply the burn when marking on land on enemies. The Moon E will briefly stun enemies when the meteor lands. The Star E will drop the meteor much more quickly. If the meteor marks allies or Adina, they will receive healing from the stars. The impact of the meteor will also provide healing for Adina and allies if they are in its radius. Connecting these star signs will empower Adina's E. This conjunct of E will leave a growing nebula on the ground when the meteor lands. This nebula will regularly heal Adina and her allies until it expires. So, that was a lot. As mentioned earlier, Adina has a lot of different variations of each spell, but we can simplify her options by summarizing the usage cases for each ability. For example, E can be liberally used for poke damage. While the Star E nearly guarantees the meteor explosion to hit your enemies, using the Sun E will still apply the combustion burn, and the Moon E can provide a well-timed stun in the middle of a hectic fight. Treating E as more of a filler ability will help you cycle through your celestial signs more efficiently. While Q has a short cooldown, proper usage of it can be fairly important to properly deal with many matchups. Moon Q is an incredibly efficient self-peel ability against melees and ranged auto-attackers. However, this does not mean you cannot use Sun or Star Q as fillers in order to deal damage or refresh your signs. If you are spacing properly and are effectively using conjuncts, the cooldown of Q will be available before you know it. W is the ability that requires the most care, especially if you are utilizing the Moon conjunction for it. The cast time is slow enough that many opponents can walk out of it if they're not sufficiently distracted or immobilized, so if you want to get value from this ability, you want to make it count. Comboing Moon Q with any W is technically the most consistent way of landing the W. I would personally stress that learning to weave your spells and efficiently cycling your signs is more important than making sure that you use the correct signs with the correct ability. The latter will come more naturally with experience, and it is more important to become mechanically and mentally comfortable with navigating Adina's unique mechanic. If you simplify Adina to its simplest form, the importance of successfully using your conjunction becomes very clear. Assuming you have all spells available, you can consume all 5 signs in one spell rotation, allowing you to gain another conjunction opportunity. If you do not use your conjunction during a sign cycle, you have to cast 2 more spells to refresh them, which can be disastrous in a close fight. There are also many scenarios where you would not use an available conjunct. For example, splitting 2 consecutive moon signs into Q and W as opposed to conjuncting them is technically better self-peel, but it is worse damage. While the Star conjunct provides an incredibly large amount of healing, you might find better survivability by buffing yourself up with the crowd control immunity from Star W and then utilizing the Trail of Stardust from Star Q to run away. While the Sun conjunct might be tempting to use for a nice burst of damage, it is occasionally more correct to split up the Sun signs to allow yourself to utilize the Moon or Star conjunct. Learning these type of decisions while also learning to manage celestial signs can be incredibly difficult if not impossible. That is why I personally cannot stress enough that getting comfortable with the physical management of signs comes before all else. You may have noticed from the gameplay going on in the background that I really like using the Star conjunct. The reason for this personal preference is mostly because I personally believe there's more consistency and value from hitting the point and click button over the higher damage but riskier Moon conjunct. That being said, I cannot begin to express how much reward you can get from hitting a max level Moon conjunct, especially early in the game. The damage of this spell is extremely good since it directly echoes the cast. While the Sun conjunct does approach similar damage as you level Adina's ultimate, it will never quite match the same amount of damage, assuming you have equal skill points in each ability. To summarize before I go into another splurge of words, in my playstyle, the Moon conjunct is used more as a stalling ability for my next Q or W cast. It provides extremely good crowd control while being off my actual spell cooldowns. For many other playstyles though, the Moon conjunct will simply win you the fight if you hit it. However, due to the emphasis on the ability, your Q and W will be less effective. In this clip that I saw from a friend, you can see just how much damage the Moon conjunct does to their opponent. If you scroll back and check my own clips, you'll be able to notice a distinct damage difference between the two. Since Adina is such a versatile and complex character, in my opinion, it is incredibly difficult to definitively say which playstyle is better. That's not even considering the multitude of other builds, contract usages, and other undiscovered techs that Adina can utilize. There's so much creativity that can go into this character that it would be a disservice to her and her players to reduce it down just to 2 ways to play. With that said, I hope you enjoyed the introductory video for Adina, the Friendly Astrologer. I plan to dive deeper into particular ways to pilot her that have been discovered and utilized for those who want a more elaborate guide for my favorite character until return. If you got this far, I would appreciate it if you dropped a like, commented, or subscribed. More than that though, I hope you had a great day or night and that tomorrow brings you an even brighter future.
You wanted to know which planet was causing your suffering? How about